Now listen to me very carefully. When somebody hurts you, disrespects you, or plays with your emotions, your first instinct is to react. You want to say something back. You want to explain yourself. You want to prove your point. You want them to feel what you feel. That's human. But let me tell you something Steve Harvey would tell you straight to your face. The moment you lose control of your emotions, you hand over control of your power. When someone hurts you, disrespects you, or breaks your emotional trust, the natural human reaction is immediate response. The mind wants to defend itself. The heart wants to release pain, and the ego wants to win the moment. But in reality, the first reaction is often the most dangerous because it is driven by emotion rather than wisdom. Emotional reactions are fast, but they are not always right. They can create more damage, more misunderstanding, and more regret than the original situation itself. That is why learning the power of a calm response becomes one of the most important emotional skills a person can develop in life. A calm response does not mean you are weak or indifferent. In fact, it often requires more strength than reacting loudly or aggressively. When you choose calmness, you are choosing control over chaos. You are deciding that your peace is more valuable than proving a point in a heated moment. This kind of emotional discipline separates maturity from impulsiveness. Many people misunderstand silence and calm behavior as acceptance, but in reality, it is often a conscious decision not to feed negativity with more negativity. In moments of emotional pain, the mind tries to convince you that responding immediately will give relief. You may feel that explaining yourself repeatedly or arguing your side will make things better. However, most conflicts are not solved in emotional heat. They are only worsened. When emotions are high, understanding is low. That is why stepping back, even briefly, allows clarity to return. In that space of calmness, you begin to see the situation differently. You realize what is worth addressing and what is better left unanswered. A calm response also protects your self-respect. When you react impulsively, you may say things you do not mean, reveal emotions you intended to protect, or give unnecessary access to your inner feelings. Later, those moments can lead to regret, but when you stay calm, you preserve your dignity. You maintain control over your words, your tone, and your energy. You show that your emotional stability is not easily shaken by someone else's behavior. Another powerful truth about calmness is that it changes the dynamic of any situation. When someone expects you to react emotionally and you do not, it disrupts their expectation. It removes their control over your emotional state. Instead of feeding into conflict, you redirect the energy. This does not always mean you approve of what happened. It simply means you refuse to be dragged into emotional disorder. In many cases, calmness alone is enough to make the other person reflect on their actions more deeply than any argument could. Over time, practicing calm responses builds inner strength. It trains your mind to pause before reacting, to think before speaking, and to prioritize peace over ego. This does not happen overnight. It is developed through repeated conscious effort. Each time you choose calmness instead of reaction, you strengthen your emotional intelligence. You become less controlled by circumstances and more guided by awareness. Ultimately, a calm response is not about losing your voice. It is about using it wisely. It is about understanding that not every situation deserves immediate reaction and not every hurt requires verbal response. Sometimes silence carries more weight than words, and calmness becomes the clearest expression of self-respect and emotional maturity a person can show. Emotional control is one of the most powerful skills a person can develop in life, yet it is also one of the most difficult to practice when you are hurt, misunderstood, or disrespected. In moments of emotional pain, the human mind naturally seeks immediate reaction. You want to defend yourself, explain your side, correct a misunderstanding, or sometimes even hurt back. But emotional reactions are rarely guided by wisdom. They are driven by impulse. And impulse often creates consequences that last much longer than the moment of pain itself. This is why learning to pause, breathe, and choose a calm response can completely transform how you handle difficult situations and relationships. When someone hurts you, your first instinct might be to respond quickly, believing that silence means weakness or acceptance. But in reality, silence can be one of the strongest forms of emotional intelligence. It shows that you are not controlled by the behavior of others. It shows that you are capable of observing before reacting. Most conflicts grow bigger not because of what happened initially, but because of how people respond to what happened. A calm response breaks that cycle. It prevents escalation and gives you space to think clearly instead of reacting emotionally. Emotional control does not mean ignoring your feelings. It means understanding them without allowing them to take over your actions. When you stay calm, you create distance between what you feel and what you do. That distance is powerful because it protects you from saying things you might regret later. Many relationships, friendships, and opportunities are damaged not by the original issue, but by words spoken in anger. A calm response protects your dignity even when the situation is unfair. There is also a deeper psychological shift that happens when you stop reacting emotionally. People often expect a certain pattern from you. They expect anger, arguments, explanations, or emotional reactions. When you break that pattern by staying calm, it changes the entire dynamic. It removes their ability to control the situation through your emotional response. Instead of feeding the conflict, you withdraw from it mentally while still being present physically. This shift often forces the other person to reflect on their behavior more seriously than any argument could. Calmness also allows clarity to enter your thinking. In emotional moments, perception becomes distorted. You may misinterpret intentions, assume worst-case scenarios, or react based on fear rather than facts. But when you slow down your response, your mind begins to process the situation more rationally. You start to see what truly matters and what does not. You realize that not every action deserves a reaction, and not every insult deserves a reply. This clarity helps you make better decisions about how to move forward. Over time, practicing emotional control builds inner strength. It trains you to respond instead of react, to think instead of rush, and to choose peace over conflict. This does not mean you allow people to mistreat you. It means you choose the right moment and the right way to respond. A calm response is not silence out of fear, but silence out of strength. It is the ability to stay grounded when everything around you tries to pull you into chaos. Walking away from disrespect, emotional manipulation, or repeated hurt is one of the most misunderstood yet powerful forms of self-respect. Many people believe that staying and fighting, explaining, or trying harder will eventually change how someone treats them. But life experience and emotional maturity often reveal a different truth. Not every situation is meant to be fixed by your effort, and not every person values your presence until you remove it. Walking away is not about revenge or ego. It is about protecting your peace when it is no longer being respected. The human mind naturally resists walking away because it associates effort with value. You may feel that if you just explain one more time, tolerate a little more, or give a little extra patience, things will improve. But when respect is missing, more effort rarely creates change. Instead, it often creates imbalance. You begin giving more while receiving less, and over time, this imbalance drains your emotional energy. Walking away becomes necessary when staying begins to cost you your dignity, your peace of mind, or your self-worth. There is also a powerful emotional shift that happens when you choose distance over constant engagement. When you are always available, always responding, and always trying to fix things, your presence becomes expected rather than appreciated. People tend to take consistent availability for granted, but when you step back, something changes. Silence creates awareness. Distance creates reflection. The absence of your energy makes others realize what your presence actually meant. This is not manipulation. It is natural human psychology. Value is often recognized more clearly in absence than in constant exposure. Walking away also teaches emotional boundaries. It sends a clear message to yourself and others that your time, energy, and respect are not unlimited resources to be misused. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about defining how you allow yourself to be treated. When you fail to walk away from repeated disrespect, you unintentionally teach others that your boundaries are flexible. But when you do walk away, you reinforce a standard that protects your emotional well-being in the long run. Another important aspect of walking away is the internal transformation it creates within you. At first, it may feel uncomfortable because your mind is used to attachment, familiarity, and emotional investment. But with time, distance brings clarity. You begin to see patterns that were previously hidden by emotional involvement. You realize where you were overgiving, where you were ignored, and where you were not truly valued. This awareness is painful at first, but it is also freeing because it helps you avoid repeating the same cycle in the future. Walking away does not always mean the end of connection. Sometimes it simply means the end of access. You are no longer available in the same emotional capacity for those who cannot respect it. This shift often leads to personal growth, stronger self-respect, and better relationships in the future. When you choose yourself, you are not losing someone else. You are gaining your own stability. Ultimately, walking away is not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of emotional strength. It requires courage to detach from what is familiar, especially when emotions are involved. But true strength is not measured by how long you endure disrespect. It is measured by how quickly you recognize your worth and act on it. Choosing to walk away when necessary is choosing peace over chaos and self-respect over emotional dependency. Peace is one of the most powerful states a human being can achieve, yet it is often sacrificed in the pursuit of being right, being understood, or being validated by others. In emotional situations, especially when someone hurts you or disrespects you, the natural instinct is to respond, defend, and prove your point. However, experience in life gradually reveals a deeper truth. Not every argument is worth your energy, and not every situation deserves your emotional participation. Peace is not something that happens by accident. It is something you consciously protect by the choices you make in difficult moments. Many people underestimate how expensive emotional reactions can be. When you react impulsively, you may feel a temporary sense of relief, but it often comes at the cost of long-term peace. Words spoken in anger can damage relationships permanently. Reactions driven by ego can create misunderstandings that take much longer to heal than the original issue itself. In contrast, choosing peace often means choosing silence, distance, or a calm response, even when your emotions are pushing you in the opposite direction. This choice is not weakness, it is emotional discipline. Peace begins with understanding that you do not need to participate in every conflict you are invited into. Not every criticism requires a response. Not every insult requires correction. Not every misunderstanding requires immediate explanation. When you start filtering what deserves your attention and what does not, you begin to regain control over your emotional world. Without this filter, every situation becomes a battlefield, and over time, that constant emotional engagement leads to exhaustion and stress. Another important aspect of protecting peace is learning to detach your self-worth from other people's behavior. When someone mistreats you, it does not automatically define your value. However, if you respond emotionally to every act of disrespect, you may unknowingly give that behavior more power over your inner state. Peace comes from recognizing that other people's actions are reflections of their own character, not measurements of your worth. This understanding allows you to stay grounded even when others are not behaving fairly. In many cases, peace is preserved through emotional distance. This does not always mean physical separation, but rather mental and emotional detachment from unnecessary chaos. You stop overthinking conversations, stop replaying situations repeatedly in your mind, and stop trying to control outcomes that are not in your hands. This mental distance creates clarity, and clarity is essential for peace because confusion is one of the biggest sources of emotional disturbance. Protecting your peace also requires discipline and communication. Not every feeling needs to be expressed immediately. Not every thought needs to be shared in the heat of the moment. When emotions are high, communication becomes reactive rather than constructive. By delaying your response, you give yourself time to process, reflect, and respond with intention instead of impulse. This small habit can completely change the quality of your relationships and your emotional stability. There is also a deeper strength in choosing peace over proving a point. Many people believe that winning an argument equals winning a situation. But real-life experience shows that winning an argument often comes at the cost of losing peace. You may be right, but still feel drained. You may prove your point, but still feel unsettled. Peace, on the other hand, leaves you with clarity, stability, and emotional balance. It allows you to move forward without carrying unnecessary emotional weight. Over time, prioritizing peace reshapes your personality. You become less reactive, more observant, and more intentional with your energy. You begin to understand that emotional stability is not about avoiding problems, but about responding to them in a way that does not destroy your inner balance. This shift does not happen instantly. It is developed through repeated choices where you choose calm over chaos and understanding over reaction. Ultimately, peace is not something you find in other people or external circumstances. It is something you build within yourself by how you respond to life. Every moment of restraint, every calm response, and every decision to step back from unnecessary conflict strengthens your ability to remain centered. And in a world full of emotional triggers and constant noise, the ability to protect your peace becomes one of the greatest forms of personal power. Self-worth is one of the most important foundations of a strong and balanced life, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood concepts in human behavior and relationships. Many people try to find their value through external validation, such as attention from others, approval in relationships, success in social settings, or recognition from peers. However, true self-worth does not come from outside sources. It is built internally through awareness, self-respect, emotional discipline, and consistent choices that reflect how you allow yourself to be treated. One of the clearest signs of strong self-worth is the ability to remain calm when others do not treat you the way you expect. In emotional situations, especially when hurt or disrespected, it is easy to react impulsively or chase validation. But people with strong self-worth do not depend on emotional reactions to prove their value. They understand that reacting to every situation emotionally can weaken their sense of control. Instead, they choose responses that protect their dignity rather than damage it. This does not mean they ignore problems. It means they handle them with clarity instead of chaos. Another important aspect of self-worth is the ability to set and maintain boundaries. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about defining what is acceptable for your emotional and mental well-being. Without boundaries, relationships become unbalanced, and people may begin to take advantage of your patience, kindness, or emotional availability. When you fail to set boundaries, you may unintentionally teach others that your time and energy can be accessed without respect. On the other hand, when you establish clear boundaries and enforce them consistently, you communicate self-respect without needing to say much. Self-worth is also deeply connected to the ability to walk away from situations that repeatedly damage your peace. Many people stay in unhealthy dynamics because of emotional attachment, fear of loss, or hope for change. But staying in situations where you are consistently disrespected slowly weakens your sense of identity. Walking away in such cases is not an act of pride or anger. It is an act of self-preservation. It shows that you value your emotional stability more than temporary comfort or familiarity. Over time, this decision strengthens your internal foundation and prevents repeated emotional damage. Another key element of self-worth is emotional independence. When your mood, confidence, or self-image depends heavily on how others treat you, your emotional state becomes unstable. One moment of attention makes you feel valued, while one moment of neglect makes you feel unworthy. This cycle creates emotional dependency, which weakens self-worth over time. Emotional independence means understanding that your value remains constant regardless of external behavior. It allows you to remain stable even when people are inconsistent, distant, or unfair. Self-worth is also reflected in how you treat your own time, energy, and attention. People often underestimate how valuable these resources are. Time spent chasing validation, over-explaining yourself, or repeatedly proving your value to those who do not appreciate it slowly drains your inner strength. When you begin to prioritize your own growth, goals, and peace, you naturally shift away from environments that do not align with your well-being. This shift is not about arrogance. It is about alignment with your own standards. Over time, strong self-worth changes the way you interact with the world. You become more selective about where you invest your energy. You become less reactive to disrespect and more focused on self-growth. You stop seeking approval from people who cannot recognize your value and start investing in relationships and environments that reflect mutual respect. This transformation does not happen overnight. It is built through repeated decisions that reinforce your value rather than diminish it. Ultimately, self-worth is not something that is given to you by others. It is something you build through your actions, choices, and boundaries. Every time you choose peace over chaos, respect over approval, and growth over validation, you strengthen your sense of worth. And the stronger your self-worth becomes, the less control external circumstances have over your emotional world. It becomes the quiet foundation that shapes your confidence, your relationships, and the direction of your entire life. True strength is not always loud, aggressive, or visible. In fact, some of the most powerful forms of strength are quiet, controlled, and deeply internal. One of those forms is the ability to respond wisely instead of reacting emotionally. In life, people will inevitably hurt you, misunderstand you, disappoint you, or treat you unfairly at times. What defines your character is not what happens to you, but how you choose to respond in those moments. Emotional reactions are natural, but wisdom lies in learning when to respond, when to stay silent, and when to walk away. When someone hurts you, your emotions often demand immediate expression. You may feel the urge to defend yourself, explain your side repeatedly, or confront the situation with intensity. However, emotional reactions are often short-sighted. They are driven by pain rather than perspective. In contrast, a calm and thoughtful response comes from awareness and self-control. It allows you to step back from the intensity of the moment and see the situation more clearly. This clarity is essential because most emotional conflicts are not solved in the heat of reaction. They are either escalated or worsened. One of the most important aspects of emotional maturity is understanding that not every situation deserves your energy. Many people fall into the habit of overreacting to everything, believing that silence means weakness or that calmness means acceptance. In reality, silence is often a form of strength because it shows that you are not controlled by external behavior. When you stop reacting to every emotional trigger, you begin to reclaim your inner stability. You stop giving others power over your emotional state and start protecting your peace more intentionally. Another key insight is that emotional control protects your dignity. In moments of anger or pain, it is easy to say things that cannot be taken back. Words spoken in emotional distress often create long-term consequences that last far beyond the original issue. Relationships, friendships, and even opportunities can be damaged by impulsive reactions. A calm response acts as a protective barrier between your emotions and your actions. It allows you to communicate more effectively, or sometimes not at all, depending on what the situation truly requires. There is also a psychological shift that occurs when you consistently choose calm responses over emotional reactions. People around you begin to notice that you are no longer easily triggered or emotionally available for unnecessary conflict. This changes the dynamics of how others interact with you. Instead of engaging in arguments or drama, you become someone who observes rather than reacts. This shift often leads to greater respect, not because you are louder or more dominant, but because you are composed and difficult to manipulate emotionally. Calmness also creates space for self-reflection. When you are not constantly reacting, you gain the ability to reflect on your experiences more deeply. You start to recognize patterns in your relationships and behaviors that were previously hidden by emotional noise. This awareness allows you to make better decisions in the future. You begin to understand which situations are worth your attention and which ones are better left alone. Emotional clarity is one of the greatest benefits of self-control. Another important aspect is that calm responses help preserve your mental and emotional energy. Constant emotional reactions are exhausting. They drain your focus, disturb your peace, and keep you stuck in cycles of stress and overthinking. By choosing calmness, you conserve your energy for things that truly matter, such as personal growth, meaningful relationships, and long-term goals. This shift in energy management significantly improves both emotional well-being and life direction. Ultimately, the ability to remain calm in situations where others expect reaction is a form of quiet power. It is not about suppressing emotions, but about mastering them. It is about choosing long-term peace over short-term emotional release. With time, this discipline becomes part of your identity. You become someone who does not react impulsively, but responds intentionally. And in a world where emotional chaos is common, that kind of calm strength becomes one of the most valuable traits a person can have.